Planet Reddit. Today's story is...
My husband faked amnesia to leave me without consequences, but he discovered that the real memory loss would be his when I exposed his whole lie. My husband is planning to fake a loss of memory so he can leave me without facing any responsibility. I hope this sounds as ridiculous to you as it did to me. I can't believe he thinks I'm that naive. He has come up with a cartoonish plan to escape our marriage without consequences. You are probably wondering what kind of toxic relationship we have for my husband to be willing to do such a thing just to leave. The truth is that our marriage was good, putting this aside. I was really happy. The problem lies with him, or perhaps with his attraction to someone else. Let me tell you a little about my life. I have been married to my husband Jez for almost 5 years. During this time, I have tried hard to be the best partner I can be, and I have loved him unconditionally, but it seems that my love was not enough, or that I, as a person, was not enough for him. Maybe he just got tired of me, because otherwise, there is no reason for him to be planning all this. I can't express how angry I feel when I think about everything I've done for him and what he's planning to do to me. If someone had asked me about my feelings for him just over a week ago, I would have replied that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. Now, I'm thinking about how to make him pay for everything. A radical change. When I decided to marry Jez, many people advised me not to because he wasn't particularly successful. They told me I could find someone better. But I didn't want someone more successful or better. I wanted to share my life with him. I loved him sincerely, and I have shown him that every day, doing anything for him. It's true that he has grown as a person and has changed quite a lot. He is more successful than he was before we got married, and now he has a much higher salary than I do. Maybe that messed with his head. Maybe, I don't know. Does he think I should be with someone much younger? If all this wasn't happening to me, I would never have believed that Jez was capable of something like this. He used to be a tender and affectionate husband who made me feel every day that I had made the right decision in marrying him. It all started a few months ago, when for the first time in my life I became suspicious of Jez. I woke up in the middle of the night, something very unusual as I am a deep sleeper and never wake up until morning. Jez wasn't in bed, so I thought maybe he was in the bathroom, but after a minute I noticed that none of the lights were on. I also heard a distant voice, as if someone were talking on the phone. I got up to investigate what was happening. I found my husband lying on the sofa, talking to someone. I couldn't make out the conversation well, but I was sure he was talking to a woman because of the tone of his voice. But as soon as I called him, he ended the call immediately. I asked him what he was doing, and he replied that someone from work had called him about an emergency. I found it suspicious because he is rarely called after dinner, and even less so at that time. Also, he was lying on the sofa talking on the phone like a teenager, but Jez explained to me that everything was under control. I decided not to insist, but I was beginning to suspect that something strange was going on with him. Anyway, he tried to sound quite convincing. We'd been together for a long time, so naturally he knew exactly what to say to manipulate me. I discussed this with my best friend, Yasmin, and she advised me to forget about it. That Jez wasn't the kind of man who would do something like that. I agreed with her and tried to let it go, but my intuition warned me that something was wrong. Even if I had decided not to pay attention to it, it was already too late because the deception was underway. A few weeks ago, I lied to Jez. It was a necessary lie. Now that I know the truth, I find it funny and hypocritical. Jez has always been very jealous, excessively jealous. I've noticed that he rarely allows me to travel with my friends. I go out with them, yes, but Jez hates it when I'm away for several days. A few weeks ago, my friends, including Yasmin, started planning a week-long trip to a place I wanted to visit. I had the money and everything ready, but I knew that, knowing Jez, I would never be able to convince him. But I desperately wanted to go, so I simply decided to lie to him. Well, that lie ended up being the reason why I discovered the truth. Isn't life so depressing and ironic at the same time? I told Jez that I had a work trip that I had to attend for almost a week. Jez accepted my explanation without question. Now, I don't usually lie about things like this, only when it's necessary. And when I do, I always try to make up for it somehow. So, 2 weeks ago, when I was about to leave, I was already thinking about how I could make up for this lie. Then I left with my friends to enjoy a week's break, but unfortunately the trip was cut short. About 4 days later, one of our friends had an emergency, and most of us decided to return. Since almost all of them were going back, Yasmin and I thought, okay, let's go home too. There was no point in staying if we weren't all together. On my way back, I was about to call my husband to let him know, but Yasmin suggested I didn't. She suggested spending a day with her, as we rarely had that opportunity, and as we were technically still on vacation, I accepted. That night, I was staying at Yasmin's house, and we decided to go out for dinner at a very nice restaurant, quite far from where we live. It's a place that everyone in our city goes to, because it's far away but not too far. Obviously, I didn't want to run into my husband, but as soon as we arrived, I immediately saw him having dinner with a young and extremely attractive woman. I asked Yasmin to confirm if she saw the same thing I did. She confirmed that they were indeed having a romantic and very cheerful dinner. So I took some pictures and called my husband. Jez answered the call right in front of her. He told me he was at home and had ordered Chinese food. I asked if I could video call him. He replied that it wasn't necessary and that he wanted me to enjoy my time. I told him that I would be returning home tomorrow, and he replied that he couldn't wait to see me because he felt very lonely. He did all this without the slightest hesitation, which made me think about how many times he had done the same thing. Not only did the woman he was with know that he was a married man, but this seemed to be something they did regularly. When we returned to Yasmin's house, I drank to excess. Yasmin was also unable to offer words of comfort, and the next day, I knew what I was going to do. She asked me, and I told her that I wouldn't let him get away with it so easily. She also asked me for the photo I had taken and said she would try to find out who the girl was. I thanked her and left. As soon as I got home, just acted as usual, loving and affectionate, and I could hardly believe that only 12 hours earlier he had betrayed me. It was surprising how calm this man was. I tried to ask him what he had done the night before, just to see his reaction, but he remained completely calm. So I spent the next few days trying to figure out what was really going on. It turns out that Jez is so confident that I will never doubt him that he doesn't even bother to hide the evidence. When I went through his messages, he had a girl saved as assistant too, and he talked openly about how much he liked her. He hadn't even deleted the messages. So, naturally, I saved everything as evidence. I even found some photographs. They have been dating for over 7 months, and according to the messages, they are both deeply in love. It broke my heart to see my husband talk about me as if I were a used object that he was already tired of. He called her an affectionate nickname, but thanks to Yasmin, I discovered that her real name is Scarlett. So, for the past few months, Jez has been having an affair with her. He can't wait to leave me. And you're probably wondering, why hasn't he left already? Well, we have a contractual agreement that doesn't allow him to just walk away. If he files for divorce, everything is divided 50-50. But if we both agree to separate, we each keep what is legally ours, which means I would get nothing from him. And no, there is no infidelity clause here. We haven't even considered it. So, obviously, he wants a divorce by mutual agreement, but he knows I would never agree simply because he wants to be with someone else. So he has spent months devising the perfect plan. From the title of my post, you will know what his strategy is. In a few weeks, he plans to pretend that he has lost his memory. He thinks that by doing this, he will be able to get her to agree to the divorce. It seems absurd and comical at the same time. Fortunately, I now know the whole truth, and he knows nothing, which gives me a clear advantage. Update 1. Before I tell you how Jez finally put his plan into action, let me clarify something. Many people say that I deserve Jez's infidelity because I lied to him about my trip with friends and when I returned. I want to be clear. Even before that trip, I suspected he was cheating on me. I wasn't going to miss an outing with friends because of a manipulative cheater, just because I didn't have concrete evidence. I think it was pretty obvious when I found Jez in the middle of the night, casually talking to someone while lying on the sofa. Not exactly professional behavior. All he needed was one of those corded phones, and he would have been twirling it between his fingers, saying, "No, you hang up first." Anyway, it's been a few weeks since my initial post, and my husband did exactly what he planned to do. Honestly, I didn't expect him to actually do it. Last time, I told you about how my husband wanted to leave me without sharing any of his assets. Honestly, I think I mentioned it before. I wasn't interested in his money. But I also didn't want to let him get away that easily. That's why I wrote here, and many of you gave me valuable advice. Thank you. Part of me just wanted to put all this behind me and move on. I've always been financially independent, and I earn enough to live comfortably. The only thing I would really miss, apart from my marriage, would be our home. The house we live in actually belongs to Jez's parents. We were supposed to live there temporarily, but we liked it so much that we never moved out. So, after my post, I took about a week to decide what to do next. I decided to let Jez get on with his plan. Yes, instead of thinking that I was naive enough to fall for his trap, if I had been honest and told him that I wanted him to leave, I would have let him go. But if he really was going ahead with his ridiculous plan, I would make him regret playing this game with me. That was my decision. Although it pained me deeply to realize that he never cared about me, I wasn't looking to get revenge on Jez. I just didn't want to spend another moment with him. But then I reflected that, well, he had no right to do all this and walk away as if nothing had happened. So I waited for him to set his plan in motion. He already knew all the details, so Yasmin and I met to discuss what I should do. He knew exactly which doctor he was going to use. Yasmin even did some research on the doctor. Now I just had to wait. That week I really did have a work trip, so I was away for a few days. We didn't communicate during that time because the relationship between us was tense. There was that little detail of his infidelity, something he probably repeated while I was away. But this time, when I returned, I found him in bed, recovering from an apparent serious fall, accompanied by one of his friends who told me the whole story. According to him, Jez had fallen and hit his head hard. He was hospitalized for several days, but no one wanted to notify me so as not to worry me. As soon as Jez saw me, he pretended not to recognize me. I must admit that I was impressed by how convincing his performance was. I kept insisting that I was his wife, and he kept insisting that he wasn't married. If I didn't know the truth behind all this, his performance would probably have convinced me. His friend gave me more details about what had happened. He explained that, due to damage in a specific region of the brain, Jez had lost a considerable amount of memories, although he retained many others. That the medical professionals were not sure which memories would return or if they would return at all. He indicated that it could take days, months, years, or that he might never recover those memories. He wanted me to accept the possibility that Jez simply could not remember. But he also suggested that we could create new memories together. Jez apologized for not being able to remember me. I can't deny that his interpretation was convincing, but this whole business of nobody warning me that my husband was hospitalized seems too convenient for him. But if he really has lost his memory, he may not remember our marriage agreement. So it would be okay if he took me further in the divorce, right? Update 2. I've come to tell you that the divorce proceedings for Jez are progressing satisfactorily. You see, after my last update, I met with Yasmin and we decided on my next step. The most logical thing was to gather evidence first, so we started there. Since the supposed accident, Jez has been sleeping in the guest room. He refuses to sleep near me, arguing that it feels strange because he doesn't know me. To him, I am still a stranger, even though we were married. I understood and respected his space. But what he doesn't know is that I have an audio recorder in that room, recording every conversation he has with his dear girlfriend. He is very pleased that everything is going according to plan, and continues to tell her that she only needs a few more weeks, after which she will be free. Well, he's right to assume he'll be free, but he has no idea what kind of freedom I'm going to grant him. Besides, I already had plenty of evidence against Jez's friend, so I decided to talk to him. I have recorded conversations between him and my husband, and I doubt he wants to be implicated in an attempted fraud. So Yasmin and I visited the friend, and I asked him to reveal the truth. He continued to feign ignorance, but when I showed him the evidence and threatened him with legal action, he started to talk. He told me everything that had happened, and I recorded his confession. After obtaining his testimony, I let him go. Well, I assured him that he wouldn't get into trouble, but that's not true. I plan to use his statement as evidence when the time is right. I don't feel guilty about it. What he did was much worse, infinitely worse than my actions. After completing that phase, I felt I should concentrate on Jez. Regarding his condition, my supervisor authorized me to take a few extra days off, even a week if I needed it, and most of the time I could work from home. Thanks to this, I have stayed close to Jez constantly and he has not been able to meet with Scarlett. Well, he did see her once, but that was because I let him, to get more evidence. But that's not all I've been doing. I thought that, since I'm putting up with this situation to expose him, I should also make his life a little miserable. So every day I make him do activities or eat foods he hates. He thinks I'm doing it to help him regain his memory and strengthen our relationship. He hates it, but refuses to admit it, which is even more fun. Let's look at those vegetables that Jez hates so much, but which are beneficial for the memory. A few days ago, to supposedly help him remember, I made Jez get up early and go for a run. Jez really hates running, but he forced himself to do it. He looked completely miserable, and I enjoyed it enormously. I also cooked him some fish, which he hates, but he tasted it and said, "Maybe my tastes have changed. But maybe combined with vegetables it tastes better." I'm convinced that he really hated living with me at that moment, but he couldn't admit it. But it wasn't even finished. Yesterday, the moment I had been waiting for finally arrived. During dinner, I announced that I had something special for him. I told him that I had bought some delicacies. Some years ago, Jez had told me which foods he would most hate to eat in his lifetime. I got the second and third on his list of culinary nightmares. It wasn't possible to get the one at the top. I told him that I had bought some delicacies that he loved before he lost his memory, and that perhaps that would help him remember our love. He was willing to try them until he saw the canned chicken and the ox testicles. He almost stopped breathing and exclaimed, "What on earth is that?" I replied that I loved them and that he should try a bite of each. He thought about it for a moment and then agreed. "Okay, fine." He was trembling as he tried to eat. He opened the can of chicken, which looked disgusting. Then he almost shed tears as he bit into the testicle. As soon as he did, he started coughing violently and vomited. I said, "I'm so sorry." And he replied, "I don't know why, but I hate this." I'm having so much fun with his fake memory loss that I don't know whether to proceed with the next step or continue to take advantage of the situation. But I know that sooner or later the time will come to end our relationship. Update 3. Exactly 2 weeks have passed, and I have agreed to the divorce. That is to say, I have agreed to the divorce in front of Jez, but he has no idea what I have been up to. In his presence, I have desperately tried to get him to remember details of our life together, but obviously his memory has not returned. I think he really enjoyed seeing me try so hard to win him back, because every time I did something special for him, he seemed pleased. It was extremely difficult to pretend that I wanted to keep him in my life. To be completely honest, I longed to get him out of my life for good. But I wanted to do it my way, you understand? Well, Jez gradually began to hint to me that he didn't enjoy being with me, and he subtly suggested that maybe we should separate. Every time he mentioned something like that, I pretended to ignore it because I wanted to hear it straight from his mouth. I pretended to do everything possible to get him to love me as I supposedly loved him, but he simply couldn't remember anything or feel anything towards me. He kept saying that he no longer felt love for me. He even told his parents that he wasn't enjoying living with me and that he would rather live alone than with me. Yes, his parents are also helping him. I know this because he has spoken to them normally on some of his calls, as well as to some friends. He has also asked me not to mention his memory loss to anyone because he wanted to wait until he recovered it before facing unfamiliar faces. My in-laws called me and told me that he had also been sharing his concerns with them. They know how much Jez means to me, and they simply suggested that we separate for a few weeks to see how he felt. They argued that maybe that way he would remember something. I replied that I would consider it. And 2 days ago, Jez told me he had something important to discuss. He explained that it hurt him to see me trying so hard to awaken his feelings, while he could offer me nothing in return. He assured me that I wasn't pressuring him and that, if he felt nothing, it wasn't his responsibility. He told me that he couldn't continue to break my heart and that he believed there was a better way to handle the whole situation. He said that, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see me as his wife and didn't want to live with me. At that moment, I started to sob just to make him think that I was really hurt. He explained that he felt this was the best option given the circumstances and that I couldn't stay trapped in a loveless relationship. Breaking up would be the best thing for both of us. He filed for divorce, and I replied that I needed time to think about it. He gladly accepted. Today I told him that if he wanted to divorce, I wouldn't stop him. He reminded me that this was the best solution for both of us. And I replied, "You know what? Maybe you're right. But what he doesn't know is that I will grant him the divorce on my terms, not on his." Update 4. Several months have passed, and I must tell you what happened during the divorce proceedings. First of all, yes, the divorce went ahead, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to post an update, but a divorce doesn't get resolved in a week. But let's pick up where we left off. Only a few days after my last update, Jez filed for divorce, and initially I agreed, making it a divorce by mutual consent. But then I took the situation in an unexpected direction. I informed the judge that Jez had deliberately lied and deceived me. Jez was absolutely perplexed, unable to believe what I was saying. I accused him of causing me psychological problems due to the depression caused by the breakdown of our marriage. And then I declared that I had all the necessary evidence to prove it. When I presented all the evidence I had meticulously compiled, from audio recordings to screenshots of photographs, and even his friend's confession, there wasn't much to argue about. Jez looked like a soulless corpse. He was horrified and could not even speak for several minutes. Due to the overwhelming amount of evidence, I was awarded 65% of all assets, which exceeds what was established in our initial agreement. Jez was completely unhappy with this result. He found me outside the courthouse and asked me how I had found out everything and why I had so much evidence. I replied that apparently I was more astute than he imagined. He questioned me as to whether I knew the whole truth, why I had put him through this situation instead of simply letting him go. I explained that I didn't want it to be so easy for him to abandon me as if I were a disposable object. He assured me that he never intended to hurt me. I replied, "That's exactly what you did." Then he begged me not to continue with this process. I replied, "This is already decided, like ox testicles." His expression of disgust was identical to the one he had that day, as if he were about to vomit. To think that he consumed them just so that I would believe his plan, but the only one who ended up swallowing bitterness was him. Before addressing the rest of the consequences, I believe that not only did the judge fine Jez an additional $15,000 for his deception, but that his friend, the accomplice, received another $7,000 fine for his participation. Part of the consequences was also the 65-35 split instead of the original 50-50. But on top of that, I also notified his company's human resources department of what he had tried to do. You know, he used all his accumulated vacation time, plus a few extra days, to execute his plan and to eat ox testicles. But if an employee takes extra days off for a scam, isn't it a bad idea to keep him on the payroll? At least the company agreed with that opinion and fired him. As I mentioned, I don't think he really misses anything he's lost, if until recently he didn't even remember owning it. I can't help but laugh when I think about how he tried all this and it went completely wrong. Update 5. It seems that in my story many people suffer from memory loss, because now it is Scarlett who suffers from it. She has forgotten that, once the divorce was final, they could be happy forever. But she ended up forgetting Jez in the arms of another man as soon as the divorce proceedings were completed. What excuse will she have used? I can explain I have amnesia. I only know about this because this man is a friend of mine, and as he is single, he can have relationships with whoever he wants. But if we are talking about other forgetfulness, we must mention Jez's parents, because they have also forgotten that their son was residing on their property, and they have found someone new to pay the rent. Jez and I were paying a nominal amount because we stayed there longer than initially planned. But now, without a job, Jez can no longer afford it. It's a residence in a nice neighborhood, so the rent is quite high. Even with our combined salaries and the substantial discount, it was still a considerable sum. How lucky I am not to be experiencing memory problems. I see that they can be very problematic. And he was pretending for a whole week. Look at everything he lost as a result.